Members' motion with no legislative effect. Members who wish to speak, please press the request to speak button. This council will debate on Mr. Nick Chan's motion on holistically reviewing and enhancing legislation relating to child protection. 6 members will move amendments to the motion. This council will proceed to a joint debate on the motion and the amendments. I will first call upon Mr. Nick Chan to speak and move the motion. Then I will call upon Mr. Mark Zhong, Ms. Maggie Chan, Mr. Tang Fei, Mr. Bill Tang, Reverend Peter KOON, and Ms. Grace Chan to speak in sequence, but they may not move the amendments at this stage. The joint debate now begins. I now call upon Mr. Nick Chan to speak and move the motion. Mr. Nick Chan. President, I move this motion on holistically reviewing and enhancing legislation relating to child protection. Children are our future. We must protect them from harm. This is the responsibility of everyone in society as well as the government. Now, if the wounds are not seen, they would be hard to heal. We have different pieces of legislation to protect children in Hong Kong, but it's not sufficient. They're not targeted enough. There are blind spots and shortcomings in our system. We have heard about children being abused at home or in residential homes. Now, it's really disheartening. One major blind spot is that it's really difficult to convict somebody abusing children psychologically. Physical abuse may be healed, but silent treatment and verbal violence for a prolonged period of time will put the child in fear. And the psychological trauma may follow the child for the rest of his life. Now, for physical violence, we have this offenses against the person's ordinance, but for psychological abuse, the definition is not clearly provided, and there is a vacuum in our laws. Now, President, psychological trauma and relevant cases only account for 1.2%. It doesn't mean that the problem does not exist. It has to do with the vague definition of a psychological trauma. It's difficult for children to express the harm that they have suffered psychologically. The abusers are often family members. In fact, according to statistics, 64% of the abusers are family members. We must learn from overseas experience and the mainland experience, including the UK, Europe, and US. So we must draw clear definitions in the laws, followed by professional assessment, so that the courts will have the legal backing in determining cases. Now, in light of cyber attacks and threats on the internet and using AI in committing crimes, we need to revamp the laws to catch up with the advancement of technology. Nowadays, the criminal elements would use AI deepfake technology to create child pornographic photos, or sexual grooming may take place online when the perpetrators are able to hide their real identities. In fact, on the 10th of December last year in Australia, a piece of legislation came into effect, and that is those under the age of 16 are no longer allowed to open a social media account. We should follow suit because the relevant maximum penalty is 50,000 Australian dollars. Now, in relation to the prevention of child pornography ordinance, it applies to physical images or real images for AI-generated porn materials and the danger of sexual grooming. Clearly, our laws are lagging behind. It's not just about the statistics. We are disheartened by each and every case. We need to revamp and enhance the system. The mandatory reporting of child abuse regime came into effect in January this year. I think that we are making progress, but the government must continue to protect children by reserving sufficient residential places for emergencies, and there should be sufficient mental support. Otherwise, after making the reports, the children will have nowhere to go. They don't get protected. We need a holistic review of the existing child protection regime to protect children of both sexes. Under the current laws of Hong Kong, men cannot be raped by women. It's a one-way street. So that's not a piece of gender-neutral legislation. The penalties are so out of date that there is no deterrence to speak of. We need the laws to be deterrent enough. The government should enhance deterrence by holistically review the penalty levels. The government should also mount publicity to promote care for our children, and that children should have love for themselves. Now we have different pieces of legislation in the framework, but they are scattered in different sections. The government should enhance the maximum penalties to raise the maximum penalties to enhance deterrence. On positive parenting, I think we should help risky families, help them by taking pressure off their shoulders. We should also promote self-love, and that victims should not suffer in silence. The laws are not just about provisions in black and white. It's all about it's a collective conscience of whole society. We should continue to review and enhance legislation relating to child protection so that we address the blind spots and inadequacies, so that every child in every home, campus, or network will get protected. I now put the question to you that the motion moved by Mr. Nick Chan be passed. Mr. Mark Zhao.
Thank you, Deputy President. The Roundtable has long attached great importance to the issue of children protection to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. I have 3 points made in my amendments. We want to protect children from harm and abuse. The Offences Against the Person Ordinance, OAPO, Chapter 212, Section 27 has promulgated for offences of ill treatment and neglect of a child or young person. If one is indicted, one can given a 10-year prison term maximum, and with summary proceedings, the maximum penalty is a 3-year imprisonment term. We think the sentences are too light. The 10-year term was raised in 1995 from 2 years, and it has been 20 years. There has not been any updates. We have many cases that would not hand out the maximum penalty. In addition, we have a salesperson abusing his 3-year-old child, causing death. For manslaughter, one would have been given a lifelong imprisonment term, but he is only given a sentence of 6 years and 5 months. It's far from the 10-year imprisonment term. After the 2021 Law Reform Commission report reviewing the 10-year imprisonment term, recommendation was made. The report also mentioned that there should be an offense of failure to protect. If someone realized or should have realized the child or vulnerable person under their care has been abused and they have not taken any steps to prevent abuse from happening, they have to be held accountable in criminal proceedings for the harm caused to the child or vulnerable person. The report was published 5 years ago, and we now have the mandatory reporting of child abuse ordinance. We should not stop here. The government should consult different sectors of the community as well as stakeholders to implement relevant legislative proposals. We also want to strike a balance between children protection and development of AI. We are concerned some people are making use of AI to harm children, and the convener of the roundtable, Mr. Michael Tian, already raised an oral question last year. Unfortunately, the queue was too long, and this became the first oral question of the year. We have many electrical members raising concern about this issue. There was another question on 18th of March on this topic, and the two replies given by the administration did not differ much. They just said the DOJ and other departments are working on this. We know that the administration is working on this, but when will we see the results? In the past 2 months alone, we have seen drastic changes in the development of AI. We have people making use of OpenClaw. Now we have some significant changes, updates. We have 1 year ago, we had the launch of the OpenAI Sora, and now the platform is removed. But we're still at the same position with laws. We will continuously follow up on this issue. We ask for at least a timeline for proposals to be implemented. After the 2021 Children's Residential Home incident, the Roundtable has asked for the administration to not only set up a mandatory reporting mechanism, but also enhance surveillance. We can't rely on manual random checks alone. We propose to use CCTV cameras with AI functions to identify any suspicious activity. In 2024, the government proposed to announce that they would allocate funding to introduce surveillance system with AI technologies, and we want to ask the relevant authorities to report their progress to electrical and, if possible, extend the relevant arrangements to other children's homes. I hope that members can support my amendments I so submit. Ms. Maggie Chen. Deputy President, I speak in support of the original motion and all of the amendments. We need to prevent neglect and child abuse. We need to protect mental health of children by weeding out malicious information on the internet. On neglect of a child or young person, we have seen during typhoon season or worse weather conditions, often adults would take their children to chase winds and watch waves. We have some applicable laws such as Section 27 of the OAPO, as well as Section 63 of the Police Force Ordinance obstructing a police officer in the execution of their duty. But the threshold for giving proof is very high, and this becomes restrictive. According to the Social Welfare Department data, in 2025, we have new child abuse cases of 1,354, and it shows that existing legislation is not deterrent enough. We mainly rely on Section 27 of the OAPO, being ill-treating and neglecting a child or young person. The maximum penalty is just a 10-year prison term. It does not show the importance that should be attached to children protection. And on harm of mental health of children, we are at this high-risk period of children being harmed by AI deepfake technology. In 2024, I conducted a study. 80% of the parents are worried that their children will be affected by obscene articles, and 90% of the parents don't understand the controls of obscene articles on the internet. And it has been 2 years. We have seen a greater prevalence of AI tools. Children are more than ever exposed to indecent messages, and the obscene and indecent articles ordinance were promulgated in the 80s. It is very outdated because we're now in a digital era. And in 2024, my members' motion was passed, and I'm glad that the administration has been working to enhance the functions of the Obscene and Indecent Articles Tribunal. In 2026, I urge the administration to continuously review the COIAO. I have 4 suggestions. We should have targeted legislation. First, when we have typhoon signals number 3 or above hoisted, we should not have parents bring their children who are 16 or under, if they bring them to dangerous areas, it will constitute preliminary evidence of neglect of a child or a young person. We should also refer to the LRC 2021 report on offense of failure to protect to review and enhance the maximum penalty of Section 27 of the OAPO, the treatment and neglecting a child or a young person, and we should also cover those who are living with children or closely related and did not take reasonable steps to prevent harm from being caused to the child or young person. We also need to research amending the COIAO to regulate internet platforms for AI-generated content that have appearances of children. There should be watermarks. We should also have an accountability mechanism for algorithms for the protection of children. If platforms proactively push to children malicious or indecent content, they should be held accountable. We should work with GBA mainland cities to set up a database for harmful content for children, to implement a fast removal mechanism and data collection mechanism, as well as put in place a hotline or some way of complaints to be made quickly so as to prevent harmful content from reaching children. I hope that members will support my amendments. Thank you, Mr. Tang Fei. Deputy President, I have some amendments to make to the original motion. We should not only protect physical health of children in this digital era, in this AI era, we need to also think about the mental well-being of youngsters. Social media have a profound impact on mental well-being of teenagers. And in fact, we should therefore research into teenage psychology. Recently, we have an international study in 2024. It is a large-scale study. We have 1.09 million samples of teenagers saying social media have caused a significant impact on teenagers, and it has directly caused depressive symptoms and other mental symptoms in teenagers. We have the safety concerns being cyberbullying, and for females, they are more anxious about their appearances with the use of social media. Their emotions get more extreme. For teenagers today, the virtual world has probably a more profound impact than the actual world on their growth. But without study, Hong Kong can't really gauge the impact. So first, we need to have a professional study in this regard, to have regard to local circumstances, to have a better understanding of what social media will impact youth in Hong Kong, to provide objective justifications for regulation in Hong Kong. We also need to research the practices in legislation and law enforcement in the mainland overseas. We need to see if it is too hard to legislate for that before we choose for regulation. As Mr. Nick Chen said, Australia is the frontier in this area. On 10th of December, they have made a regulation on preventing teenagers to open social media accounts, and in March 2026 they have promulgated subsidiary legislation to ensure they can take effective law enforcement. In the UK, there is similar legislation to protect children from pornographic or self-harm content. We have in the mainland a more flexible approach. They have an algorithm regulation of the internet. So for different time slots, there are restrictions for different age groups. So the children will have a more flexible use of social media. We should really learn from such approach. We should subsidize organizations to conduct relevant studies. We should try to gauge how social media affect the growth of youngsters. We should also refer to the experiences of the mainland and overseas in legislation and law enforcement to see whether we need to really catch up with the international trend to regulate children's use of social media. Deputy President, we are in a digital era. If we do not have a breakthrough mindset, our future generation will be impacted, but we need to have an objective and professional study. I so submit. Please support my amendments.
Mr. Bill Tang. Thank you, President. I speak on behalf of the FTU and I support Mr. Nick Chan's original motion as well as other members' amendments. I was listening to Mr. Tang Fei. I'd say that his amendment is actually very similar to mine. Well, he also cited the stats and data from international studies. Let me now turn to local studies. I want to highlight my point with local data, especially when it comes to child abuse and sexual abuse. Children are the future of society. The government should protect our children from harm. As the original motion suggests, the number of child abuse cases has continued to rise. According to the SWD's statistics, in terms of harm or abuse of children, the number of cases increased drastically from 940 cases in 2020 to 1,504 in 2024, up by 60%. So the whole society, along with the government, should come up with ways to address the situation. Now, I was chair of the Bills Committee to scrutinize the bill that's called the Mandatory Reporting of Child Abuse, the ordinance of which has come into effect since the 20th of January. The professionals, as well as everyone in Hong Kong, share the same intention, that is, we should improve the child protection network to lower the risk of child abuse. The original motion refers to children suffering from psychological and emotional abuse, which is even more severe and has more far-reaching consequences than physical harm. My amendment emphasizes psychological trauma brought about by sexual abuse. According to the SWD's annual report, the number of child sexual abuse cases increased from 285 in 2014 to 542 in 2024, up by 90%. Now, with fewer children nowadays, there is still an increase in case number. So this is a problem. Sexual abuse is hard to identify, especially if it involves sexual grooming. There might not be any apparent physical injuries. And for various reasons, the victims may not disclose the crimes themselves. But the psychological trauma caused by sexual abuse would have far-reaching consequences. And the consequences and the traumas are irreversible. They seriously impact on the development of the child socially, physically, and mentally. Now, if we take a closer look at the statistics for minors under the age of 16, and I'm not talking about abusers, I'm talking about the victims. Now, the number of cases involved increased drastically from 13 in 2014 to 120 in 2024. Now, what about juveniles between the age of 16 and 21? The minors have become the major victims in this category. That is for abusers aged between 16 and 21. We can see from these cases that sexual abuses are perpetrated by their peers and friends and classmates. and the number of cases increased from 75 in 2014 to 181 in 2024. We should not turn a blind eye to the problem. We need to cultivate positive and correct values in our children. We should also raise penalties against juvenile delinquents as well. For example, we talked about the algorithms, deepfake technologies with the use of AI, as well as social media traps. Now, the government must not just conduct a study. The government should specifically explore ways of enacting legislation so as to improve investigation and give greater protection to our children, so that they won't become victims because of advancement of technologies. I just referred to some data about sex crimes. It's really horrifying. I so submit, Reverend Peter KOON. The whole society is responsible for protecting children. Many cases involved peers being perpetrators, and bullying and youth gangs are often reported in the media. Earlier, in Queen's Hill in Fanling, a case happened involving a girl victim being asked by a youth gang to kneel, and she was slapped, and even an air gun was used. The victim was only aged 13. Imagine the psychological trauma caused to her. But in fact, this is just a tip of an iceberg. Many victims are victims of bully as well, and they're afraid of being bullied again in school. Some other victims have decided to join the gangs so as not to become the victim again. In fact, for the abuser and the victims of bullying, they suffer from the same level of harm. According to studies, the abusers would likely to become violent when they grow up, and they tend to have a high crime rate comparing to the victims. And so the victims, they tend to lack self-confidence when they grow up, and in the long term they suffer from psychological harm. And according to a report published by a child care organization in 2021, 1 out of 4 students suffered from bullying in schools. In light of the serious situation, we need to address the problem. Some schools may want to salvage their reputation. They want to make sure that it's swept under the carpet. So in a way, we are not vigilant enough. For the abusers, they don't feel the consequence. For schools, this is the first line of defense. Schools should include values education and life education in the school curriculum. We should teach our students how to form a good relationship with their peers. They should refrain from bullying others. Resident school social workers should also walk the extra mile. After class or during lunch breaks, the social worker should meet with the potential victims. Just have a chat and see if you're able to identify anything. In the long term, I think the government should set up a database straddling different government departments on child protection. Now, we should make sure that personal privacy is protected, and that this reporting platform should encourage anonymity of the informant, so that those onlookers can be active in reporting the matter to the police, and we can break the silence. As far as the laws are concerned, we should holistically review the system, especially if the perpetrators are minors. Many minors commit crime because of impulse. They need guidance. However, if serious bullyings are involved, even for repeated offenders, the juvenile delinquents are only asked to receive psychological counseling, or they may be allowed to take part in community service, and that's the end of the matter. Now, for the abusers, we still need to punish them. to make sure that they don't go down the wrong path. We now hear about bullying more and more often. In the past, when social media platforms were not prevalent, victims only suffer from harm once. Now, with the prevalence of social media platforms, clips of the victim being bullied may be circulated on social media platforms. So this will cause repeated harm on the victims. The government should work with the social media platform operators. If such bullying clips are found, the operator in question should take it down as quickly as possible so that the victims will not be harmed again. Now, we need to start from young when it comes to life education. In order to build a caring society, we need to make sure that children are protected so that they can grow happily and healthily in this environment. This is my vision. Next, Ms. Grace Chen. Very often when it comes to child abuse, these cases are hard to detect and it often takes place for a prolonged period of time. The trauma caused to the child may impact on the personal development and the learning ability in the long run. We do not have a consensus among different disciplines on the definition of psychological trauma or abuse. Now, for frontline practitioners, they face risks in determining whether they should report the matter. So there are difficulties. That's the crux of my amendment. According to the SWD's database, every year we receive new cases. However, for those suffering from psychological harm or trauma, the case number every year remained below 1%. So this actually shows that such cases are hard to detect. In fact, after the passage of the bill on mandatory reporting of child abuse, the guidelines have been drawn up and it's for reference by professionals. It comes with a workflow as to when the mandatory reporting mechanism should be triggered. I believe there is more to be desired. For example, signs of psychological trauma should be included so that professionals can report the matter as quickly as possible. In fact, there are 3 situations that would trigger the mechanism. That is involving threats, hallucination of being threatened as plain truancy, feigning sickness, and that the person responsible for making the report should see if the threshold is met. However, this doesn't address the problem of the hidden nature of psychological trauma. For example, a doctor refers this case of a student to the cross-disciplinary support professionals, and in fact, this child suffers from depression as a result of prolonged psychological abuse at home. And according to the guide for mandated reporters and under the framework, there is no need to report such case. So if the frontline practitioner is not sensitive enough, just following the guidelines, this child's case will never be reported, and this child will not get the protection they need. And according to pages 30 to 32 of the 2026 edition of the Protecting Children from Maltreatment Procedural Guide for Multidisciplinary Cooperation, very often psychological trauma and abuse do not stem from a single event. It's about the long-term and protracted abuse or neglect of that child by the carer, and it's a repeated pattern. This child may not there and then exhibit any psychological symptoms despite being a victim of abuse. And for the professionals, it's hard for them to determine whether the child is suffering from psychological trauma. We also need to consider the pattern of the carer as well as the long-term impact on the child in question. So to safeguard long-term mental and physical health of children. We need to give priority to children's safety. And we also need to make reference to the procedural guide and holistically review and enhance the mandatory reporting of child abuse mechanism. In terms of professional judgment, we need to accumulate experience and step up training. The Labour and Welfare Bureau and the Social Welfare Department have done a lot, President. It's not easy to identify cases of child abuse, and that is exactly why we need to pay attention to the nitty-gritty. I urge members to support the amendment. I so submit. Thank you.
Secretary for Labour and Welfare. Deputy President, first of all, I thank Mr. Nick Chen for moving the motion on historically reviewing and enhancing legislation relating to child protection. I also thank Mr. Mark Chong, Reverend Peter KOON, Mr. Tang Fei, Ms. Maggie Chan, Ms. Grace Chan, and also Mr. Bill Tang for their amendments. It gives us an opportunity to exchange our views on the topic. The government attaches high importance to children's welfare. We have been dedicated to protecting children from various harms. Protection of children involves the portfolio of different policy bureaus and departments. Under multiple existing laws, there are provisions to criminalize the behavior of harm or abuse to children. In the following, I will first focus on explaining the existing legislation. Concerning the other areas mentioned in the amendments, the Undersecretary for Security and I will give a consolidated reply later on. On sexual exploitation, the Crimes Ordinance, Cap 200, criminalizes incest and sex offenses. On the other hand, the Offenses Against the Person Ordinance, Cap 212, criminalizes child abuse and other violent crimes against children, including abandonment resulting in the child's life being endangered, ill-treating or neglecting a child or young person under one's custody, and assaulting, harming, or threatening to harm a child. To further protect children, the Mandatory Reporting of Child Abuse Ordinance, Cap 650, has taken effect on the 20th of January this year. 25 categories of specified professionals in the social welfare, education, and healthcare sector are required to report serious cases of child abuse. The mandatory reporting mechanism has weaved a comprehensive protective net which enables early identification and intervention of child abuse cases. It is also a stern warning to potential abusers that their crimes will not go undetected. It marks a milestone in protecting children. Concerning the regulation of obscene and indecent articles, the Prevention of Child Pornography Ordinance, Cap 579, prohibits the printing, making, producing, publishing, possession, and advertising of child pornography, while the Control of Obscene and Indecent Articles Ordinance, Cap 390, regulates the publication or public display of obscene or indecent articles in Hong Kong and prohibits the distribution of indecent articles to young persons, whether or not AI is involved in its creation. On the other hand, employment of children regulations, Cap 57B, prohibits the employment of children in industrial undertakings and regulates the employment of children by non-industrial establishments so as to prevent child exploitation or disruption to schooling. Besides enforcing the above legislations, policy bureaus and departments are dedicated to protecting children through a multi-pronged approach so as to maximize the effects of the laws. On that, the Labour and Welfare Bureau as well as the Social Welfare Department have been dedicated to prevention of child abuse at source. We have taken appropriate actions to protect children as well as providing appropriate social welfare services. Deputy President, the motion today involves various bureaus' remits. The Undersecretary for Security and I will listen carefully to members' views and also give a consolidated reply later on. Thank you. Professor Alex Fan. Deputy President, I support the original motion and all the amendments. The existing legislations have covered physical abuse, sexual abuse, as well as child pornography. It is multi-layered. The Mandatory Reporting of Child Abuse Ordinance, enacted earlier this year, marks an important step. However, we need to keep plugging the loopholes and keep it abreast with time. I will not repeat the statistics quoted by previous members. I will focus on the remaining part that has yet to be done, that is failure to protect offense. The LLC has suggested establishing this offense back in 2012. Now, under the Offences Against the Person Ordinance, the prosecution has to prove that the defendant has ill-treated or neglected the charge, but this is a difficult threshold to reach. The abusers may live with the victims, and the family members will keep mum about the crime. Even when we know there is a crime going on, the law cannot reach the defendant. In overseas jurisdictions, there are similar offences. For example, in the UK, the 2004 law against crime on family members has established an offence to prevent ill treatment causing death to the victim. Family members or those living close to the victim who are aware of the risk must take adequate action to protect the victim, otherwise they would be committing an offense. The focus is not to punish the abuser, but rather those family members who know the risk but stay mum. Notably, this doesn't include an institutional setting, so the government may make reference to the UK's law. The LLC report has taken into account the overseas jurisdictions reference. The focus of the failure to protect offense targets those who stand idling in face of a crime, as long as they reasonably know of the existence of a risk but fail to take reasonable actions to protect the victim, they would be at fault. They can't excuse themselves by saying that they are not the one who exacts the harm. This offense will complement the existing legislations and weave a tighter net. In 2020, in reply to the LLC's report, the government said that it welcomes the failure to protect offense. However, given the complexity of the law, especially in institutional circumstances, we have to sort out the key concepts. The government said that it would enact the mandatory reporting law first. Now, it is already done. Now, whether the failure to protect offense could come into the law, back then, the Secretary mentioned that it depends on the situation. Now, I think the government has taken the right approach to implement the laws orderly. Now, the mandatory reporting mechanism has already taken effect. We have the conditions and the obligations to, on the premise of experience gain, start a study and consultation on establishing a failure to protect offense. We have to sort out the crucial concepts and be prepared to plug the gaps. The LLC report is one with a lot of insights. The government shouldn't put the study on hold just to see how things go. Now, the public has a reasonable expectation on the government to plug the loophole of the law, given the prevalence of child abuse cases in Hong Kong. We should start studying and consulting the public on the legislation of this offense and prepare for legislative amendments. Now, I think the legislation at present have provided sufficient protection. However, we need to place the last piece of the puzzle, that is, make prosecution easier. We should meet the public's reasonable expectation, I so submit. Ms. Elaine Chek. Deputy President, investing in children is investing in the future. A comprehensive protection system can enable children to fulfill their potential and also prevent crime at source and lay a sound foundation for Hong Kong's economic growth. Children are vulnerable because they are still immature. They are vulnerable to abuse. One case is too many. However, we still see a trend of child abuse in Hong Kong. According to the Social Welfare Department's statistics, there is a rise of 4.5% back compared with 2024. In 2014, there were only 860 cases. In 2025, there were 1,509 cases. Now, most cases are physical abuse, followed by sexual abuse and neglect. There are some risk factors. More than 60% of the abusers are the parents or household members of the victim. It has to do with the lack of parenting skills and being new parents. And also, some of them have psychological, emotional issues. Now, half the cases involve children with special needs as well as behavioral problems. Data shows that when parents are under huge stress and there is a lack of support network, in dealing with children's behavioral problem, parents may channel their anger to their children, causing abuse. Now, the DAB suggests that we have to start with the source. As early as the pregnancy stage, the government needs to interfere through mother and child centers as well as other institutions. We need to screen out mothers at risk, for example, those with complicated family relationship, and provide them with additional services. This is to establish a support network and allow social workers and professionals to identify cases early. There are many NGOs with similar programs, but they lack funding, and also there is a lack of interfacing between organizations. In encouraging childbirth, the government should also consider providing regular support services. Second, we need to enhance parenting education and promote positive parenting. Studies show that those parents who have participated in parenting courses would exhibit fewer stress symptoms, and they have lower risk of child abuse. Now, the Education Bureau has established a framework of parent education for primary and secondary school. However, the effect is yet to be seen. We need to change the culture, and that takes a lot of effort, especially for grassroots families, new immigrants, and non-Chinese speaking parents, because of language barriers as well as lack of information. They have no access to these services. And sometimes there is no follow-up on the cases. For example, there is no tracing on whether there is actual changes in the parents' behaviors. We need to enhance the participation rates of parents in parenting courses and also set KPIs for assessment. Mr. Chong, Deputy President, many governments have legislated for more measures to protect children. Hong Kong is no exception. There are criminal offences against child abuse, and also the mandatory reporting on child abuse ordinance has come into effect earlier this year. There are certain protections for children already, but I am concerned in this ever-changing world how we can better protect children from physical and psychological harm. At present, there is not a dedicated law to protect children from online risks. The government is only protecting children from online harm through administrative measures. In the mainland and many overseas jurisdictions, there are dedicated laws to protect children from online threats. We should learn from them. In the mainland, based on the harmful effects of addiction of electronic screen products on children, the mainland governments have launched a scheme to limit the screen time for children based on a registration system. There are similar systems in other places as well. For example, the Indonesian government has announced that given the threats, including online addiction, online bullying, and online pornography, those under 16s will be banned from using social medias. For example, Meta, Facebook, Instagram, and Roblox. Accounts belong to those under 16 will be suspended. The ban will be implemented gradually until all the platforms fulfill the obligations. For Australia, last December, it requires all the social media platforms, including Facebook and TikTok, remove accounts held by those under 16. The same goes for the UK. It limits the use of chatbots and other social media platforms by minors. On the basis of the cybersecurity law, which has been implemented for 2 years, the UK government is seeking to improve the protection for children. The same goes for Denmark and other European Union member states. And also, corporations who provide internet services are also imposed responsibility to provide protection. Now, in South Korea, the government has mandated that gaming server providers must not allow underage children to log on to their server after 12 a.m. The guardians are allowed to set a screen time for the children in terms of gaming. And also, the Japanese government has passed a law to tackle gaming addiction and empower parents to limit the screen time of children. We need to address this issue face on. The cyber world is the fourth dimension, but there are the same extent of risk as in the real world. Now, many years ago, I have submitted a question in concern of the risk faced by children by on the online world. Children may be subject to the same risks as in the real life, for example, loitering and also other threats. So we need to extend our protective measures to the online world. I support the motion moved by Mr. Nick Chen, that is to comprehensively review the legislation relating to child protection. The government should do better in terms of child protection. With the advancements of technologies as well as the changes in the internet landscape, we need to conduct more studies to launch more measures to encourage proper use of the internet and electronic products by children. We have to enhance the information literacy of children and also make parents more aware of the risk. Thank you.
Mr. Lam Kwang, thank you. Deputy President, I speak in support of Mr. Nick Chen's original motion. We have in Hong Kong multiple pieces of legislation to protect children from harm. But as we move along in time, we have some laws dealing with complex family relationships and children's interests that still have loopholes that can be plugged. Through today's discussions, hopefully we can further enhance the protection of children's interests. I have followed up on a case in relation to custody of a child. So we have a grandparent who has grandchildren who were born out of wedlock, and the parents were unwilling to take care of the children. So the grandmother had to take care of the grandchildren. But the parents still have custody of the children. So in the end, the social welfare department becomes the legal guardian. Even though the grandmother is taking care of the children, with this, we have, for say, school admissions or public housing arrangements or even surgery decisions, the grandmother faces challenges. And I have I've referred this case time and again to the administration, but the social welfare department only gave oral support. The housing department wanted to help, but then due to some of the relevant housing laws, they are restricted, their hands are tied. The Home Affairs Department district officer has also worked with some frontline officers to conduct home visits to the relevant household, but the challenge still is without guardianship, the grandmother cannot really resolve the different issues. This is not an isolated case. We have in 2014 a family court case and later appeals that has the same issue, and the judge in the judgment said existing legislation does not allow the court to transfer guardianship to other parties. They are hoping that with the Children Proceedings Parental Responsibility Bill that was being drafted then can change this situation. Unfortunately, because the bill was shelved due to the social circumstances then, and that has extinguished the wishes of the grandparents of different families. We can perhaps refer to the laws of Australia, for example, for those who have great interest in the interests of children, such as grandparents. They can apply to the court for guardianship, and in the UK laws, they also provide for a form of special guardianship while allowing the birth parents to keep custody. In 2004, the Law Reform Commission has already proposed to remove relevant restrictions preventing a third party from making a relevant application. So I hope the administration can amend the relevant guardianship laws to remove the restrictions. We should also refer to the recommendations for the Children Proceedings Parental Responsibility Bill. If one has lived with a child for over 365 days, they can apply for guardianship. This should prioritize children's interests. I know that it can take long to amend laws, so perhaps the administration can implement administrative measures from the time being so as to allow carers to make certain decisions with healthcare or education. We want to make sure people will not suffer because of these barriers in law. We should allow carers and children to live in harmony, especially during the growth stage of children. I so am speaking in support of the amendments. Mr. Chen Pui-leung, Deputy President, we have seen an increase in the number of cases of child abuse and youth gangs and school bullying. There is a need for us to review our current mechanism for children protection. We need to have a safety net to protect children. We need to make sure the laws are comprehensive to identify early on and prevent abuse to children, to create an environment safe for children. And we have different laws that would protect children from various harms. But then we have seen people say in different legislations, because we have different definitions of children, it can really hurt the effectiveness of the laws. There are also different penalties associated. For example, for the laws related to employment of children, we have those age 13 and 15 being able to be hired by different bodies. And we have some of the offenses that will apply to children under 16, and we have some that will apply to those under 14 or 18. With different definitions of children, some groups may be neglected, so I think the administration should review the definitions of children and see if there's a need to unify the definition. In terms of penalties, under the crimes ordinance, any male having a sexual act with a girl who is under the age of 13, one can be sentenced to lifelong imprisonment. But then, in actual cases, many sentences are light in public impression. We have a married primary school counselor having sex with a 13-year-old girl. He is only sentenced to 2 years and 3 months. And we have also the Prevention of Child Pornography Ordinance. The maximum penalty is 5 years or 2 years. But then we have someone who's relatively young who was convicted and was only sentenced to 6 months prison term. So we really need to review the effectiveness of different laws, and if we see a light sentence, we should have the DOJ lodge an appeal. Last month, I actually raised an oral question on bullying, and the reply given was the Education Bureau in the past 5 school years received 72 school bullying complaints, but they did not have statistics on the nature of bullying cases. I understand that cases involving bullying will be handled by different departments. We have the Equal Opportunities Commission that will deal with sexual harassment cases. We have the Office of the Privacy Commissioner for Personal Data that will handle doxing cases. I think we should have coordination of different departments to conduct data analysis so that we can have more targeted preventive measures and laws. I also want to say this. We need to take a systematic approach to prevent youth gangs and school bullying, and we need to form a safety net with concerted efforts from different sectors and stakeholders. And families are at the forefront of this. Parents should communicate with their children and identify any emotional issues of their children. If they don't want to go to school or have some injuries, they should intervene early on. Schools also need to create a safe culture and should have life education courses. There should also be specific bullying handling procedures so as to prevent whistleblowers, to protect whistleblowers. On a community level, we can have social welfare organizations and care teams reach out to hidden youngsters to lower the chance of them becoming bullies or those being bullied. I also submit speaking in support of the original motion and amendments. Members, as we do not have enough time today to complete the debate, I will suspend the meeting at about 6:30. Mr. Woon-kit. Thank you, President. I speak in support of the original motion and the other members' amendments. As we have the mandatory reporting of child abuse ordinance coming into effect, we have entered a new era, but laws are the baseline. We need to do more. We are only penalizing those after the fact. We need to prevent abuse from happening in the first place. As the Chief Executive in the 2025 policy address, we should have a family-friendly society, and we need to have a comprehensive safety net formed by different sectors of community. And I have 5 suggestions. We need to tackle the root cause of the problem. Many child abuse cases stem from pressure in family duties. Parent education is a long-term prevention solution. We should have, through schools and community platforms, promote to parents positive parenting and tell them disciplining their children doesn't mean they have to punish them physically. Should seek support if they need help. We should also provide psychological counseling to high-risk families. We should also have schools take a more proactive approach. Schools are at the forefront of children protection. We need to have teachers exercise more than their statutory duties. They should help children protect themselves. We should have safety education for children so as to teach children what acts are considered inappropriate. We should teach them what abuse is and how they can be protected against digital risks such as AI, deepfake technologies, and cyber content. We need to remove the stigma associated with seeking support. We also need to have comprehensive support provided by the community in terms of children protection. Protecting children is the responsibility of society, not just of parents and schools. We need to perhaps expand the arrangements for neighborhood support to alleviate pressure on grassroots families. We can also work with the tech sector and civil society organizations to promote awareness. If we are lagging behind in awareness. Children will be the most vulnerable group in the cyber world. We also need to enhance cyber and data integration. We have data related to children protection being stored with different departments. We do not have a way to comprehensively analyze relevant data. We should have a cross-departmental children protection data platform that will consolidate data on abuse reports, psychological counseling, cyber crimes, and through big data analyses, we can identify some high-risk groups and deploy resources in a targeted manner. We should also publish relevant data to enhance public awareness in order to promote early intervention. We also need to have regard to developments in AI technology. We can see the AI deepfake technology being used to make indecent content, and such content is exposed to youngsters. And if children are exposed to such content, it can cause long-term trauma. So we should set up a mechanism to remove such content quickly, and we should review existing legislation to see if we can address relevant cyber crimes. Protection of children, with the protection of children laws are the baseline. Education is a system. We need to have a comprehensive framework to enhance deterrence. We should also have, through education and families, provide better support and establish a zero tolerance culture against child abuse. We need to make our laws more comprehensive. We also need to enhance community awareness to create a safer environment for our children. I so submit.
Ms. Ginny Mann. President, we have different pieces of legislation in Hong Kong to protect our children, but I want to cite some figures. According to SWD figures, between 2020 and 2024, the number of child abuse cases increased from 940 to 1,504. That's 60% increase in 5 years. Now, in every case, children suffered. According to the newly registered cases in 2024, 40% suffered from physical harm, and also neglect, 20% neglect. Psychological harm only accounted for 1.1%. We're concerned whether indeed psychological traumatized children only accounted for such a small number of cases, or is it that there is a lack of clear definition in our laws and it's hard to identify these cases? Many children suffered from prolonged psychological trauma. It's hard for the laws to intervene. These are invisible wounds. In the UK and the US, psychological trauma and abuse are already included in the laws in preventing abuse. We need to do more. And when it comes to the crux of the matter, we need to have regard to the carers. Now, Hong Kong people work for long hours. The parents suffer from a lot of pressure. They don't have time to take care of children. They rely on the grandparents or domestic helpers. But then they receive limited parenting training. There's a lack of breathing space. Carers often suffer from emotional problems themselves, and they might put pressure on the children that they are taken care of. So we need to tackle the problem at source, and that means the government should enhance support for carers by increasing the number of childcare places, stepping up mental health support and parenting education to lower the risk. Now, according to the Offences Against the Person Ordinance, for willful attack on children or child abuse, the maximum penalty is one of 10 years imprisonment. However, it was put in place several decades ago without amendment. Now there are different ways to torture children. In fact, a judge even commented that the maximum penalty of the law may not reflect the gravity of the offense, and there is a need to raise a penalty. Apart from giving psychological trauma and abuse a definition, I also agree with Mrs. Maggie Chan's amendment that is for adults taking the children to so-called chase winds and watch waves during extreme weather. They should be penalized as well because children cannot protect themselves. There is a need to legislate to give protection to children. We need to give clear definitions in the law so as to prevent parents from neglecting their children. School bullying is also another major problem. Now, schools are often caught in the middle. Very often the abuser would only receive a verbal warning. There is a lack of deterrence, whereas the victim continues to go to school. They are impacted on psychologically, and this also affects their learning. Targeted penalties should be imposed. I agree with Reverend KOON's amendment. Now, I also agree that nowadays, with the prevalence of pornography on the internet and the prevalence of social media and mobile phones, there is now a greater chance for children to have access to pornographic materials. Some countries have decided to stop young people from using social media. I don't think this is the right approach. It's normal to have access to the cyber world. It's about helping children build correct values in using the internet and using AI so that they know how to protect themselves. And this is one way of cultivating digital media literacy among them. We also need to teach children that they should exercise self-restraint to prevent addiction, another mental health problem. The Education Bureau should include the correct use of gadgets and social media platform in the curriculum. I support the original motion. We should take the three prongs together: legislation, education, and support, so as to allow our children to grow up in a healthy manner. Ms. Nixie Lam, President, I support Mr. Nick Chan's original motion. We need to address the pain point of child protection. They do not know how to protect themselves. They are not mature enough. They are vulnerable. We need to plug the loopholes in our existing system by improving the legal safety net. Now, when it comes to child protection laws, there is a lack of definition of children. In some provisions, it's defined as those below the age of 13. In some others, below the age of 16 or even 18. It's quite ambiguous. Now, the lack of a clear definition deprives children of adequate protection. When it comes to harming children, the maximum penalties may not be proportionate to the permanent harm caused to children. Now, I remember in 2023 about sexual offenses, I put an oral question in this council about checking the sexual offenders' conviction record. And I said that for abusers, we should make sure that the names are revealed. They should not enjoy anonymity. And we need to make sure that they will not take up any work relating to children. This is the first line of defense when it comes to protecting children. We must not relax this line. Under the existing mechanism, it's a voluntary arrangement. Employers need to proactively conduct this check with the consent of the candidate. We're talking about the vulnerable group. In other places, the more stringent mechanism is put in place. The neighborhood will be informed if the sexual offender moves in. Hong Kong is lagging behind. It's just too lax. We're being too gentle to the abusers. We should make sure that no such offender can take up work relating to children. Now, I remember the administration's response was that some teenagers committed indecent assault on a fellow student, and we should give him a chance to rehabilitate and turn anew. Now, of course, we can give differential treatment to offenders of different ages. If it's a first offender, we can give him a chance, but for repeated offenders and for sexual offenders involved in grave crimes, I don't think they deserve this chance of rehabilitation. They don't deserve to have privacy at all. We should not compromise children's safety for the sake of this handful of criminals. Now, in this digital era, President, there are escalating risks facing children on the internet, such as the deepfake technology, AI, as mentioned by other members. Child pornographic materials are produced. Sexual grooming is prevalent on the internet, followed by blackmail, etc. There is a legal vacuum when it comes to child pornography involving the use of AI and fake content. In the last term, I also put this question to the administration. It's for the Security Bureau to trigger the procedures. But I think we can take preventive measures before anything happens. We could take it up, and this should be taken up by different bureaus. We should also educate children so that we identify the risks as early as possible and prevent them from harm. In fact, there is a general consensus that in some of the court cases in recent years, the penalties are on the light side. It's not enough to address the harm caused to children. So I support the holistic review of the child protection laws so that we build a strong umbrella to protect our children. The mandatory reporting of child abuse mechanism is now in force. The original intention is to stop our children from being harmed. However, excessive enforcement is also another problem. In fact, 2 weeks ago, there were heated discussions on the internet about one of these cases, and parents have become quite anxious, as well as professionals. We're not sure where the line should be drawn. We must not budge an inch when it comes to child protection. Now, for the single fall from grace and crimes committed by young offenders, we can give them a chance. For repeated offenders and offenders of serious crimes, we should not tolerate them. We should plug the gaps in the laws so that we build the strongest net to protect our children. I support the motion. Mr. Canmore. I support Mr. Nick Chan's original motion. It is our primary responsibility to protect children. This is also a long-term task for the government. Over the years, the SAR government has enacted different pieces of legislation to protect children, including Prevention of Child Pornography Ordinance, Protection of Children and Juveniles Ordinance, as well as the Mandatory Child Reporting of Child Abuse Ordinance recently passed. These laws cover prevention of abuse, stepping up regulation, promotion, education. It shows that the government is committed to improving the protection for children. However, with the emergence of AI and deepfake technologies, as mentioned by my fellow members just now, the laws nowadays may not fully cover the potential hazards caused to children. Some criminals indeed used deepfake technology to create indecent and obscene pictures of students. And with AI, these pictures can spread across different social media platforms. It can even be used for deception. This brings long-term trauma psychologically to children. And it's very difficult for law enforcement agencies to identify the culprits. Children are vulnerable. They don't get sufficient protection. In fact, in 2024, in the mainland, legislation was enacted to set out the responsibilities of platform operators, and tech firms are required to put in place firewalls to ensure cyber security. There should also be dedicated departments to oversee the matter. In the U.S., again, the similar laws are put in place. There are now discussions on expanding the coverage to AI and deepfake technologies. So all these show us that it's now the major trend across the world. We need to keep up with the world, and we also need to grasp the opportunities and draw up specific guidelines and legislate as quickly as possible so that in the digital era, children will get sufficient protection. I have the following suggestions. First, the cross-departmental working group should comprise Education Bureau, Social Welfare Department, Department of Health, the police, and also the Cybercrime, Cyber Security and Tech Crime Office, the Personal Data Privacy Office, as well as scholars, NGOs, so that a multi-party platform can be set up to identify high-risk cases and drop response plans. Protection guidelines should also be drawn up covering new technologies such as AI and deepfake technologies. It should cover cyberbullying as well. The Privacy Commissioner and the relevant organizations should play their role as gatekeepers so that Should there be suspicious content, they should be taken off the shelf as quickly as possible. In the long run, we should learn from the international experience and progressively improve our legal framework. My third suggestion is to conduct a territory-wide and regular survey to have a full grasp of the various risks facing children in the digital environment, including privacy issues, and a transparent and open database should be set up for formulation of policies. The fourth suggestion is to enhance digital literacy among parents as well as students. The government should step up publicity and education to equip parents and students with knowledge about cyber risks. There should be regular workshops, and a platform for information should be set up to help parents and children identify traps so they can be resilient. Now, this is not just the responsibility of our legal system. It's a responsibility of the whole society. We must take a preventive measure and take people first in protecting children so as to ensure that children can grow up in a safe environment for the long-term stability of our society. I so submit. The meeting is now suspended until 9 a.m. tomorrow.